many have been debating if the UFC has had the worst year or the best year. There's been tons of great moments, but there's also been a lot of bad fights, bad performances, fighters just overall taking L's. So today, let's put it all to rest. Let's put away the good, let's put away the bad. So I want to welcome you guys. It's time for the JackMMA Awards. We're going to be giving out some of the most prestigious awards like Fight of the Year, Fighter of the Year, and also some bad ones like Worst Fight of the Year, Robbery of the Year. But let's get into it, guys. Let's start off with our first category, Fight of the Year. The nominees: Sean Strickland vs. Dricus Du Plessis, UFC 297. Zell Huber vs. Rebavix, UFC 306. Bobby Green vs. Jim Miller, UFC 300. And the winner, Alex Pereira vs. Khalil Roundtree, UFC 307. I just thought this fight was amazing. Back and forth action from both guys. Arguably round of the year with that fourth round, too. Now, Worst Fight of the Year, the flip side of the coin, our nominees: Leon Edwards vs. Bilal Muhammad, UFC 304. Calvin Kattar vs. Aljamain Sterling, UFC 300. Jairzinho Rozenstruik vs. Shamil Gaziev, UFC Fight Night. And the winner is Mario Bautista vs. Jose Aldo. An absolute disgrace for the legacy of Jose Aldo. You gotta feel bad for Aldo. Hopefully he comes back to a better fight. The best card of the year, our nominees: UFC 306, just because of the whole Sphere experience with tons of fun fights. UFC 308, the one in Abu Dhabi with Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, tons of trash talk, as well as Khamzat Chimaev just dominating Robert Whittaker. UFC 299 in Miami with Dustin Poirier, BSD, O'Malley vs. Vera, and just overall totally stacked card. But the winner had to be UFC 300. Obviously, this might be the best UFC card of all time, arguably. From top to bottom, tons of fun fights. Yeah, it was just overall really good. Rivalry of the Year, right? So this is going to go to the best rivalry, the best back and forth between two fighters. The nominees are Dricus Du Plessis vs. Israel Adesanya. Adesanya literally crying at the press conference. Muhammad Mokaev vs. Manel Kabe, literally leaving to Muhammad Mokaev's departure from the UFC. John Jones vs. Tom Aspinall, with both these guys going back and forth, having that face-off earlier this year. But the winner for me had to be a fight that's going to happen next year. Umar Nurmagomedov versus Merab. The two back and forth. This seems to be like the closest we've come to Conor versus Khabib beef in a while, honestly. Even though this fight isn't happening this year, I still gave it the Rivalry of the Year, so let's hope that they don't disappoint in January. Robbery of the Year is going to go to a fight that, yeah, just had a totally wrong decision here. The nominees are Brian Battle versus Randy Brown at UFC 310. Jose Aldo vs. Mario Bautista at UFC 307. Cyril Gane vs. Alexander Volkov at UFC 310. And the winner is Garrett Armfield versus Sergio Sidney, with Sidney even admitting himself that he thought the other guy should have won.
Personally, I thought I lost, I'll be honest.
I don't know if that's ever happened in a robbery, so that's why I definitely just had a win there. The next award we're giving Best Moment of the Year. The nominees are the UFC going to the Sphere, obviously with great graphics. It was just overall a good experience. I can only imagine being there. Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka being made on short notice, just the shock of it all with Conor McGregor pulling out. John Jones and Tom Aspinall had their first face-off this year where they had that super awkward encounter in the beginning of the year. But the winner for me had to be UFC 300. I mean, just from little things like the fact that they had old graphics in the beginning, just from the fact that every fight, including the prelim fights, could have been on the main card. It was a really good pay-per-view. And obviously had great moments in the fight like the Gaethje Holloway knockout and also Pereira beating Jamal Hill. But speaking of the next category is the biggest L of 2024. Now, the winner of this category will finally get their first win this year. Now, this was surprisingly a competitive category, right? Like a lot of people could have gone on this list, but here are the nominees. Nate Landwehr for purchasing a suit for the UFC 310 press conference and then not even getting invited to the press conference and then losing that weekend to Doho Choi at UFC 310. Michael Chandler for being weeks away from a Conor McGregor fight to not even getting it and later on losing to Charles Oliveira. Benoit Saint-Denis from the beginning of the year being treated as one of the hot prospects in the lightweight division to losing 2 fights brutally. Leon Edwards for losing to Bilal Muhammad and dropping off the face of the earth. And number one has to be Jamal Hill, who lost to Alex Pereira at UFC 300 and has also clowned himself on the internet time and time again. I would say I feel bad for Jamal Hill, but he kind of brings this on himself. But don't worry, Jamal, you got your first W. I hope this makes your 2024. Next category is a big one, Submission of the Year, right? So there's a lot of good submissions this year. The nominees are Vicente Luque submitting Thembo Garimbo at UFC 310, fastest anaconda choke in UFC history. Islam Makhachev submitting Dustin Poirier at UFC 302. Brian Ortega submitting Yair Rodriguez with an arm triangle at UFC Fight Night Moreno vs. Royval 2. But the submission of the year had to go to Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker, where Khamzat Chimaev literally broke the teeth of Robert Whittaker. It was absolutely insane. And Khamzat Chimaev got a lot more respect back after that. But the next one, knockout of the year, there were a lot of good nominees for this one, and here they are. Carlos Pratos knocking out Li Xing Liang at UFC 305. Ilia Topuria knocking out Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298. Ilia Topuria knocking down Max Holloway at UFC 308. But you don't have to be a genius to know that the winner is Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje in the 5th round last last second of the fight after inviting Gaethje to swing in the pocket with him. That was just an epic moment. I don't know what moment is actually going to beat that in the future. That was absolutely insane when that happened. Now, this next category is fraud checks of the year, right? So this goes to guys that started off the year, you know, with pretty high hype and ended the year with not as much hype. The nominees are Joe Pyfer after losing to Jack Hermanson in pretty dominant fashion, Shamil Gaziev after having an embarrassing performance at Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Benoit Saint-Denis, but the winner of this category had to be Bo Nickel after that terrible performance against Paul Craig. I've been saying Bo Nickel is overrated for years now, so guys, I said it first, but at least Bo Nickel wins this award. Trash talk of the year, right? There was a lot of trash talk, a lot of fun moments, fun beefs, as I mentioned before, with rivalries. Here are the top picks for the best trash talkers of the year. Rob Dvalishvili making videos online against Sean O'Malley, to trash talking Umar as well. Brian Battle, Ilya Taporia for talking so much shit, but number one by far has to go to maybe one of the most underrated trash talkers of the year, Dricus du Plessis, after making both Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya cry. This is mind games to a whole nother level here. Next up is Breakout Fighter of the Year, who started with 0 and gained the most momentum this year. The nominees are Umar Nurmagomedov to, you know, literally getting a title shot this year, Kayla Harrison from making her debut in the UFC this year to now being in title contention, Carlos Pratas to getting 4 wins this year, all by knockout, and that was a close second, but number one for me had to be Joaquin Buckley, also getting 4 fights inside the welterweight division, beating Colby Covington, and now just really being in that title contention spot. So for me, it has to be Joaquin Buckley. Betting upset of the year. What was the best betting upset of the year? The nominees are Ayman Sahabi defeating Javid Basharat at plus 575, Dustin Poirier beating BSD at plus 124 odds, which might not be the biggest odds, but everybody was picking against Poirier at this time. Dan Hooker defeating Mateusz Gamrot at UFC 305. Hooker was plus 250, but number one had to be Gabriela Fernandez defeating Wang Kong by submission at plus 700. I was actually live streaming during this and placed a bet on the live stream on Gabriela just for fun, and this was my insane reaction. Oh! The most underrated fighters of the year. The nominees are Alexander Volkov for, yeah, like he had a pretty good year and got robbed at the end of it, so he's not really going to get much recognition. Ian Gary for still not getting enough credit for what he did against Shavkat. Dricus du Plessis for beating Adesanya and Sean Strickland and not really getting much credit. Like, there isn't really much talk of him being fighter of the year. Not saying he is fighter of the year, but still, I mean, he had a pretty good year too. But the winner has to be Alexander Pantoja, one of the most underrated fighters on the roster, and definitely the most underrated champion right now. Most hated fighter of the year. This is the fighter that we all just don't like right now. The nominees are Mario Bautista, Ron Gracie, Bo Nickel, John Jones, and the winner is Jamal Hill, because Jamal Hill, like I said, just made a total clown of himself. I don't think anybody likes this guy anymore. I think that everybody is just clowning him at this point. But guys, we lost a lot in 2024 in all seriousness, right? There was a lot of big things that happened, a lot of big changes, and I wanted to make a little tribute to actually, you know, kind of honor some of the people that we have lost, and I hope you guys enjoy before we talk about Fighter of the Year.
UFC is launching a revolution in combat sports technology.
The new gloves are now the old gloves. He's not under contract anymore. I think the PFL is going to get a great undefeated guy.
But I'm wide awake. I'm wide awake now. You can get put to sleep for real.
Let me try to recover from that, guys. Let's start off with Female Fighter of the Year. The nominees are Zhang Weili, Valentina Shevchenko for coming back and finally beating Alexa Grasso, Chris Cyborg for at 39 years old beating Larissa Pacheco. Pacheco is the only person to beat Kayla Harrison, but the winner for me had to be Kayla Harrison for getting 2 wins the UFC, debuting and now being in title contention. I think there's so much hype around her and potentially a big fight with Amanda Nunes around the corner. But Male Fighter of the Year, there's a lot of options for this one. This was very tough to pick, guys, but here are the nominees. Here are my picks. Carlos Pratas, Joaquin Buckley, Ilya Taporia, but the winner for me had to be Alex Pereira. Yes, I know Ilya Taporia is some people's number one, but Pereira fought 3 times, and especially when you consider the circumstances, all on relatively shorter notice than most, especially UFC 303 taking on Yuri, saving that event. Pereira did so much this year. This was his year by far. His popularity grew, his aura grew, he's just knocking out everybody, and I'm excited to see what he does in 2025. But guys, yes, this was 2024. Seriously, guys, the channel has grown so much. I truly appreciate all of you guys, all the support you guys give me. You guys are truly the best fan base in MMA. Hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.